Welcome to the Unlist. This is my first dedicated full-length fragrance review video for 2024. And I have chosen to make it none other than Bois, Portugal by Creed, released in 1987. So, truth be told, you have to justify a long-form fragrance review video for most people because everyone has such short attention spans. They'll watch a minute or two and click off. And I've already ranted about how that irks me when you watch only 2 minutes of a long video and then ask a stupid question or make an assumption or some other asinine comment that could be corrected by just watching the whole video, right? And it gets even worse with the 60-second shorts I do, because I actually put out 60-second short reviews, and some of y'all will literally watch 10 seconds. You'll watch just long enough for me to say, this is, like Doug DeMuro, this, and then you're already on to the next video. And then you have the audacity to ask a question or make a comment based on something you didn't watch. And again, I'm like, if I could unsubscribe you myself, I would. I would pick you up like a kid by your underwear and hang you from a freaking doorknob, because that's how I feel about it. It is an insult to my intelligence and a waste of my time. Okay, so don't do it. Just keep your mouth shut if you're only going to watch a minute or two of my video, because you don't really know what you're watching. Clearly, you don't know. And same thing with my shorts. If you're going to watch 10 seconds of a 60-second short, you don't really know what's going on, so keep your mouth shut. Comments from the peanut gallery aren't welcome, all right? We have a little more class in this house than that, which is why we are talking about Bois, Portugal, right? One of the classiest of the Creed fragrances, according to some people. I will leave that open to interpretation because I like a lot of Creed fragrances, but this one has a special place in my heart, hence the video. And again, you know, justifying a long-form video. If I did a 15-minute video on Zara Vibrant Leather, I would mentally check out myself after 5 minutes. There's not enough meat on those bones, okay? It's like handing you bone broth. You can't sustain all that. But with this, there's enough history, enough notoriety. There's enough meat that I can feed my audience. You know, not physically, of course, but mentally speaking, I can feed my audience by doing a video about this. And I know I would watch a 15-minute, 20-minute video on this fragrance, so hopefully you would too. So Bois, Portugal is kind of like a bridge fragrance for me. It bridges the old gray cap era with the more modern pre-bottled era. So those of you who don't fully understand what the gray cap era was about, you just hear about it from all the vintage guys and the obsessives or whatever. The gray cap era was the era in which Creed only sold their fragrances by filling the bottles themselves and then putting them in boxes for you. They didn't do pre-boxed fragrances. At least they didn't manufacture them. You might have been able to get some at the boutiques, or they might have had a limited run of them done and sold to their resellers, the official resellers. But the large bulk and majority of their fragrance sales came from flacons in those days. You'd walk into a Creed boutique or an authorized Creed counter in like a Neiman's or something. You'd have somebody trained with the flacons, and you'd say, I want 75 mil of whatever fragrance it was. Chèvreville, Aubépine Acacia, Bay Rum Vetiver, okay? Bois de Genièvre, however you pronounce that stupid long, stupid word. You know, Neroli Sauvage, Orange Spice, Acer Aluminum, a lot of the Selection Beard. You'd ask for the fragrance, and they'd pull the flagon down for you. Then they would get whatever empty bottle you wanted. It'd be a 75 mil slope shoulders or the big square one like this. But in both cases, clear bottles. Clear bottles, no label on them, just a gray cap. And they would have to get the little pipette out, and they would have to squirt however much you wanted into the bottle. Then they would hand crimp. They'd crimp the thing right on for you. Give you your cap, throw it in your box. That's why the boxes weren't labeled until point of sale. It's why they weren't shrink wrapped until point of sale, or they weren't shrink wrapped at all in many cases. Generic box, white box, with a little fleur-de-lis on it, and that's it. You would literally go in there, order your fragrance, they'd fill your fragrance for you, crimp it, give it to you, and send you on your way. It's the very same gimmick that Le Labo does nowadays, but Le Labo will like put the little label that shows when it was made and all that stuff. They try to be a little more scientific. But Le Labo is just doing what Creed used to do. That's it. They're doing what Creed used to do. But the problem with all the gray caps is that, well, you know, some of them became really popular, some of them didn't. So the ones that were really popular started getting bottled at the source, like spring water. The Creed factory that would make the fragrances would then start doing bottling runs. And then the bottling runs, to justify, okay, why would you buy a pre-bottled version over one you could get bottled for you from a flagon freshly at the boutique? I'll tell you how. This little word right here, millésime. You pre-bottle 4 ounces of Bois de Portugal, or you pre-bottle 4 ounces of Green Irish Tweed or whatever, and you put a fancy felt label on it that says millésime. You can then say, well, this is the millésime version. This is our finest crops, the best lavender, the best sandalwood, the whateverest of whatever in this particular batch, pre-bottled for this year. And that's where the whole batch thing really took off, was when you made a claim that this pre-bottled version in the box, ready to go, was a better version of the fragrance than the one I could fill for you from these flacons behind me. And I could upcharge and charge you more. And here's the label, and it tells you when it was made and all that stuff. You know, that's like, oh, you know, the rich people go, oh, I want that one. It's more special. And then, of course, as Creed continued to get more popular, the gray caps eventually got buried because they were associated with a previous era that the brand would soon forget, especially with all of the false claims of historical provenance and what have you. They want to bury that stuff. So only the highest selling of those gray caps transitioned over to the new era of all pre-boxed, all pre-bottled. And this was one of them. Green Irish Tweed, Neroli Sauvage were the others. A few of the other gray caps would come and go and come back. I mean, I've seen reissues of Fleur de Terreau's Bulgari has been reissued a couple times, in flagon only though. Same thing, Selection Viert has been reissued in flagon only, Acier Aluminum, and I think most recently Angelique and Sens came back. All of these flagon only. So if you see actual filled bottles of those are old inventory, which is why they sell for tons of money, right? Because they're all 30 and 40 years old. So Bois de Portugal for me is particularly special because it represents not only that transition away from that early business model of the flacons and the gray caps and the bottling it and crimping it for you, but the finished labels, no more Dymo, you know, put the label on the front, none of that garbage. Finished labels, looks a little more expensive, but additionally, from a compositional standpoint, from a smell standpoint, this is also a transitional release, as a lot of early Creeds were heavy, were redolent, mossy, woody, ambery, full of spices, full of lots of things that were popular in their time. But by 1987, some of the biggest fragrances on the market were fresh, transparent, synthetic, very modern. You know, clearly Drakkar Noir had a big impact, and then eventually Green Irish Tweed in '85, one of Creed's earliest successes, would gain more ground. Initially among celebrities and actors and stuff. Sean Penn was a very early adopter of Green Irish Tweed. And that's not something that Creed claims. You can actually back that up. You can actually find historical information on that. But by the end of the 80s, Creed was moving into fresher, more transparent styles. A lot of this had to do with Pierre Bourdon because they were heavily tapping his unused work. We've already had books written on this. I don't need to tell you. but if you want to go out and read the books, they exist. They tell you all about this stuff. And Pierre Bourdon's more experimental work, more adventurous, futuristic work, which was heavily inspired by his teacher, Edmund Runitska, his teacher, this work would come to define the smell of Creed in the 90s and 2000s. So Neroli Sauvage, Millésime Impérial, Silver Mountain Water, okay? These were all fragrances, Himalaya, these were all fragrances that would come to define that very clean, transparent, fresh, luxuriant sort of effervescent nature of the Creed smell with the house ambroxan, house ambergris note, but we all know it's ambroxan, right? But the house ambergris note would come to define this Creed smell. Green Valley was another one, sadly discontinued, but that became sort of the hallmark of Creed. And Bois de Portugal kind of bridges that older, heavier, more redolent divide with the fresher, more modern Pierre Bourdon-based work, which would end after like original vetiver and original Santal, which were all mods of other fragrances anyway. Original Santal was literally an unused mod for a Pierre Bourdon fragrance for Mont Blanc called Individuel. That's well documented too. So this fragrance, when you smell it, you're going to smell a bit of the old and a bit of what was then the new. One of the reasons why it's one of my favorites. It is a very strange juxtaposition of lavender, patchouli, sandalwood, oak moss, petitgrain, okay, all of this spicy, woody, semi-oriental fougere goodness. So think Pierre Cardin Pour Monsieur from 72, think Etienne Agenais super fragrance from like 79, think stuff like Basil Uomo Forte from 89, I believe, as well. Think Chanel Pour Monsieur Eau de Toilette Concentré from 89. Think Tiffany for Men from Tiffany. I think that was 1990. Could be wrong there. Guerlain Heritage from 92. Even Avon had one, Mesmerized for Men from 92. Even as late as 97 with Lalique Pour Homme. This very sort of almost stuffy to some people, mature, rich, classy, pinstripe suit, buttoned up, structured smell. But then dose it with a heavy amount of transparent ambroxan material, light, fresh, effervescent, sparkling, if you will. A little bit of aldehydes too. And it get this juxtaposition of fresh, sparkly, almost like champagne notes. But then underneath the champagne is this heavier, richer, greener smell. And that was very unique in 87, and it would remain fairly unique. The only thing close to it that I can think of is the original New York by Parfums de Nicolai. Now it's Nicolai Parfumeur Créateur, but it was originally called Parfums de Nicolai. And her first fragrance from 1990 was called New York. And it was a men's fragrance, and that also has a kind of fresh, slightly transparent interpretation of this redolent fougere style, and Bois de Portugal also has it. Now, of course, the older bottles are going to be a lot heavier than the new ones are, and the batch crazies are going to go, well, how old is your bottle? Okay, so the thing is, by virtue of this being a 4-ounce bottle, this is already older than the currently available inventory. They discontinued these bottles a few years ago. And when these were discontinued, I already owned this for a few years. So this is, if you want me to give you a hint, this fragrance is, according to my batch code that I'm keeping to myself here, this fragrance is at least 10 years old. So, make of that what you will. It has the really cheap spinny cap that would later on be replaced with a better, heavier cap, metal cap now, the new bottles. But Again, I don't really care. So I'm not in a competition who has the best version of Bois de Portugal. All 600,000 different versions of this fragrance they've made since '87. I don't see each one of them as a unique fragrance unto themselves, okay? And if you think that all the different versions of Bois de Portugal are unique experiences, you may want to check yourself in for an evaluation, okay? You might need some help. So all I'm going to say on that matter. So that about sums it up, guys. You know, Creed Bois de Portugal. It's one of the more unique Pierre Bourdon experiences on the male side. He didn't do too many heavy, spicy fragrances. I mean, Coros notwithstanding, Mont Blanc Individuel notwithstanding. The only other one I can think of that has his name on it that wasn't a collaborative effort, because Joop Oom was two perfumers. Michael and Myrak, Pierre Bourdon worked together on that. But Pierre Bourdon by himself, not too many heavy, spicy fragrances. So Bois de Portugal is one of the more unique things in his resume. Dolce Vita, I think, is the other one for, it's a female market fragrance. It's a good fragrance for Dior. So, which for him, that was a lifelong dream to make a Dior perfume, because, you know, Dior ran in his family. His father worked for Dior before him. And Emmet Runitska, his teacher, was also working for Dior. So for him, that was a bucket list thing to make a Dior fragrance. But these Creed fragrances, which still do not officially bear his name, are probably his legacy, for better or worse. And if you're not a Green Irish Tweed fan, and I can understand why you wouldn't be, if you're not a Millésime Imperial fan, again, I can understand why you wouldn't be. If you like the more traditionally masculine, conservative vibe, and you have the money to spend on Creed, which even discounted Creed these days is still very expensive. They've taken themselves so far up market that even like a discounted bottle of Creed is going to run you several $100s, which is disgusting in my opinion. It's not worth it. But I got in when it was still accessible. So I got in when these were retailing for about $100. It's about $100. So I could buy a brand new bottle of Chanel, brand new bottle of Dior from a retailer, okay? From Sephora, from Nordstrom and Macy's, or a bottle of this from a discounter, brand new in the box. So I made my choice. For that amount of money, I made my choice. But these days, I can't expect you to make the same choice, not when the price has doubled or tripled for a discounted bottle of this stuff. It's unreasonable. But you have so many alternatives. Like I said, you've got New York out there, so many good things. But just, if we're keeping it Creed, one of the more unique experiences that is still readily available is this one. Especially if you're a Fougere fan, if you're a fan of green things. This has been The Unlist. Hope you enjoyed it.